Are you ready? Let's begin. Do you want to know how a person becomes a serial killer? Or what drives someone to become a killer so easily? Those who kill others with premeditation, at first, they feel fear because it's their first time. But then, they get used to it, and it becomes normal to them. Some might ask, what about conscience? Didn't they feel guilty? And I say to you, don't worry, don't be afraid. Conscience also adapts. It becomes numb, and things feel normal over time. It's just like someone who starts accepting bribes. For the first time, their conscience bothers them. The second time, it still does, but less. And eventually, with repetition, it becomes a habit, and they no longer feel bad about it. The same applies to committing any sin. At first, a person feels they've done something wrong. But with repetition, that sin becomes a routine. They stop caring, and may even begin to justify or defend it. And murder is no different. The one thing you truly lose when you commit murder is your humanity. That is the real price. You transform from a human being into a human monster. Our topic today is about human monsters, a man and a woman, lovers who were deeply in love with each other. But instead of being brought together by love, they were united by crime and murder. I know the introduction was a bit long, but it was necessary to clarify this point for you. Now, let's begin our story. Imagine this. Today, I won't start by introducing the criminals or their lives, but rather by introducing their very first victim. Our story takes place in England during the 1960s. There were two people, a man and his lover, who caused chaos there. They were serial killers, obsessed with murder. Like all serial killers, once they get used to killing or have the intention to do it, the question no longer becomes, how will they kill? But, who will they kill? Step 1. They need a victim. Step 2. They need a plan to lure that victim in. Even though most serial killers suffer from mental or psychological disorders, they are often brilliant at planning their crimes. They have bizarre and astonishing ideas. With that in mind, Ian Brady decided to carry out his first crime. He had planned it meticulously, leaving nothing to chance. He was obsessed with the idea of the perfect crime, the kind that would never be discovered. He spent more than a month preparing for it and made a great effort, especially in psychologically conditioning his girlfriend, Myra Hindley, so she would accept being part of his crimes and adopt his twisted ideas. He wanted her to be the bait to lure the victims. On July 12, 1963, Ian decided it was time to commit his first murder. Despite all the planning, the plan was simple. He told Myra, "You'll drive the van around Manchester, and I'll follow you on my motorcycle. When we spot a suitable victim, I'll signal you with my headlight. You stop the van and lure them in." And so, that evening, they set out, driving around the streets of Manchester, particularly in the poor neighborhoods. There, they saw a young girl walking alone on the sidewalk. Ian gave Myra the signal, but she didn't stop. Ian became angry and asked, "Why didn't you stop? Didn't we agree?" Myra replied, "I can't. She's our neighbor. I know her. How do you expect me to stop for her?" So their first attempt failed. But that didn't stop them from trying again. They continued searching, and soon saw another girl walking alone. Ian gave the signal again, and this time, Myra stopped. The girl's name was Pauline Reed, a 16-year-old friend of Myra's younger sister, Maureen. Myra lured Pauline in by telling her she had lost a glove in a nearby moor called Saddleworth, and asked her to help look for it. Since Pauline knew Myra, she trusted her and agreed to go. The moor was a desolate place on the outskirts of Manchester, with rocky terrain and marshes. It was Ian and Myra's favorite spot, a place they often visited to take photographs. When they arrived, Ian joined them. Myra told Pauline, "This is my boyfriend. We agreed to meet here." Then, according to Myra, Pauline went with Ian to look for the glove while she stayed in the van. Half an hour later, Ian returned looking nervous and asked Myra to bring a shovel from the van and follow him. When she did, she saw Pauline's body lying on the ground, stabbed with a knife, and it was clear she had been sexually assaulted. Ian buried her there, and they left the area. That is Myra's version of events. Ian, however, told a different story. He claimed that Myra was with him at the crime scene, that she helped restrain Pauline and undressed her, and that she even took part in the assault, enjoying it. He also said he hesitated to kill Pauline after realizing she knew Myra, and when he suggested calling it off, Myra slapped him. Then she attacked Pauline first and stabbed her, forcing Ian to finish the murder. Personally, I believe Ian's version is closer to the truth. It's hard to believe that Myra would bring Pauline to that place and then leave her alone with Ian, especially since she was the one who claimed to have lost the glove. She was supposed to lead the search. So it's likely that she was fully involved. And no, the story doesn't end here. We've barely begun. This was their first crime, followed by a second, a third, and a fourth. But before we continue with the rest of the crimes, let me introduce you to these two monsters. Who is Ian Brady? He was born in 1938 in Glasgow, Scotland, to a poor family. His mother, Margaret "Peggy" Stewart, worked as a waitress in a cafe. She told him his father was a journalist who died 3 months before Ian's birth, but there is no evidence to support this. Margaret was a single mother, and during that era, single mothers were looked down upon. So she was forced to place her son with another family to raise him. That family was the Sloanes, one of the households that took in poor children and cared for them. They adopted him and raised him as if he were one of their own children. And contrary to what you might think, they weren't very rich, not at all. They were a middle-class family living within their means. Yet, they took in Ian and raised him alongside their 4 children, treating him like a true member of the family. His biological mother didn't completely abandon him either. She would visit from time to time. But Ian had no idea she was his real mother until he turned 12. From a young age, Ian was an odd child, withdrawn, isolated. He admitted himself that, even though the family gave him everything and treated him well, he was moody and short-tempered. He would get angry over the smallest things, scream, and even bang his head against the wall. His behavior was erratic. And even though he was intelligent, he lacked motivation at school. He hated going, and no one, neither his classmates nor his teachers, liked him. He refused to follow the rules and did whatever he pleased. As he grew older, signs of aggressive tendencies became clearer. He seemed to enjoy watching others suffer. Some neighbors who knew him said he was sadistic. He tortured cats, burning them, throwing them from heights, or chased dogs in the streets, hurling stones. He would catch birds and rabbits, then decapitate them. He was unwell, disturbed. By the time he was 13, Ian was arrested for burglary and theft, his first brush with the law, and the beginning of a long criminal record. Locals in the neighborhood called him Dracula because of his obsession with horror films and his cruelty to animals. A boy who watches horror movies and cuts off rabbits' heads and burns cats? That's no ordinary kid. At 15, he dropped out of school completely. He started working odd jobs, once as a cafe waiter, another time as a butcher's assistant. In his teenage years, Ian had a girlfriend. But she eventually left him. Why? Because one day, after a minor argument, she tried to make him jealous by teasing him. His reaction. He pulled a knife on her and threatened to kill her if he ever saw her dancing with another guy. He was obsessed, possessive to the point of madness. By the age of 16, Ian stood before a judge, facing 9 charges ranging from theft to assault. The judge gave him 2 choices: go to prison or attempt rehabilitation under the care of his biological mother, Margaret. He chose the second option. He moved in with her. She had remarried a man named Patrick Brady, who owned a grocery store in Manchester. Ian took his stepfather's last name and became Ian Brady. His behavior didn't change, though. He kept ending up in jail on various charges. But after his final release, his mother was shocked by what seemed like a transformation. He enrolled in various courses and committed to a job at a chemical factory. She was proud, thinking her son had finally turned his life around. But then, Myra Hindley appeared. Myra was born in a poor suburb of Manchester. Her father wasn't around at her birth and didn't see her for the first 3 years of her life. His name was Bob Hindley, a former World War II paratrooper known among his comrades as tough and stubborn. After the war, he returned home but couldn't adjust to civilian life. He became unemployed, an alcoholic, and abusive. He beat her mother and also beat Myra. The family was so poor that when their second daughter Maureen was born, they sent Myra to live with her grandmother because they couldn't afford to raise 2 children. Not only did her father abuse her, he taught her violence. He wanted her to be strong, not weak. One day she came home crying, saying a boy had hit her in the street. He threatened her with his belt and said, "If you don't go back out there and beat him up, I'll beat you instead." So she went back and beat the boy until he bled. From that day on, no one dared mess with her or her sister. Myra later said that incident was the first real victory of her life. But what she didn't realize was that some victories only lead to greater losses. Because some people are praised for stealing, laughed with when they curse, and even admired when they drink. This kind of thinking plants the wrong values in children, making them believe that wrongdoing is a form of strength. Years later, her father suffered a stroke and became paralyzed. Myra mistreated him, beating and insulting him over trivial matters. While we are taught to respect and care for our parents, this father perhaps earned no pity. He had made her what she became. Then, another event left a deep scar in Myra's soul. At the age of 13, her best friend died. At the funeral, she broke down. The trauma led her to become more religious. She started going to church and trying to improve herself. But she still faced harassment from boys, who didn't consider her attractive. Some even mocked her as a tomboy. She tried changing her appearance, read romance novels, and worked on projecting femininity. But despite her outer transformation, something dark lingered within her, a fascination with gruesome scenes. She was drawn to accidents. If someone got hit by a train, she'd rush to the scene to see the body. If someone drowned or burned, she'd be among the first to arrive, even before the police. What set her apart from other youths was a lack of empathy, combined with an extraordinary talent for acting. She could fool anyone. She worked various jobs, but nothing stuck, until 1961, when she landed a stable job as a typist at a chemical plant. And there, for the first time, she met Ian Brady, who also worked at the factory. And that was when evil met evil. As the saying goes, like attracts like. Similar souls are drawn to each other like magnets. Ian himself once said, "From the first moment we saw each other, there was a spark." Though it didn't ignite instantly, Myra was immediately captivated by Ian, drawn to his mystery and confidence. At the time, she was dating several men. But Ian's aura pulled her in deeply. Ironically, Ian didn't show much interest in her at first. And that made her want him even more. From the beginning, it was clear to Myra that Ian was not interested in her. He showed no real desire to get to know her. It wasn't out of arrogance or superiority, but because Ian was naturally a shy and introverted person, which perhaps prevented him from initiating conversation with her. Imagine, the first time he spoke to her was 7 months after their first meeting at work. And that conversation was just the beginning of a story that lasted a whole year until he finally invited her to go to the cinema with him. Yes, a whole year until he simply said to her, "Would you like to go to the cinema with me?" Look at the amount of time and emotional coldness, and now. Let me stay silent. After that first date, their meetings became very similar. They would go to the cinema, but not to watch romantic or family movies, rather, adult-only films. These movies were either filled with blood and gore or contained explicit sexual scenes. After watching the movie, they would return to Myra's grandfather's house, sit together, drink alcohol until they got drunk, and then end up in a physical relationship. Sometimes, they would read books together. Ian loved reading, especially philosophers and deep literary novels, such as Shakespeare's works and Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. He was interested in Nazism, fascism, and crime books, especially those involving torture and sadism. His favorite author was the Marquis de Sade, from whose name the term sadism is derived. He considered him the greatest writer ever. He didn't read like ordinary people, superficially or quickly just to finish the book. No, Ian would contemplate, think deeply, write notes, underline sentences he liked. He read so profoundly that what he read was etched in his mind, from which he drew ideas and visions. And I know some might ask now, look at this kind of reading. Look where it got him. But no, the fault is not in reading itself, but in the person. The flaw lies in the way of thinking and the nature of the personality. Reading is like a car, you can drive it cautiously or recklessly. Who causes accidents? The driver, not the car. By the same logic, Ian read voraciously, but this hunger took a dark and strange turn. This is what attracted Myra to his strange world. She began sharing his interests, they read aloud together, discussed, exchanged opinions, until it became almost like brainwashing. Myra herself later admitted, "Ian completely changed me within months. He convinced me there was no God, made me an atheist. If he told me the earth was flat, I would have believed him. If he said the moon was made of cheese, I would have believed him. I would have believed anything he said." Imagine this extraordinary power of persuasion. Everyone noticed the changes in Myra. She became chaotic, dyed her hair blonde to imitate the Aryan race she read about in Nazi books, started wearing heavy makeup, boots, and leather jackets, until she resembled Nazi prison guards. All because of him. And remember when I told you Ian was obsessed with the idea of the perfect crime? Do you know why? Because he was influenced by an American novel called Compulsion by Meyer Levin, based on the true story of 2 college students who kidnapped and murdered a child in an attempt to commit the perfect crime, one that would never be discovered. But the police caught them, and they were executed. Ian didn't learn from their fate. Instead, his obsession grew. Since 1963, this obsession turned into a real desire to kill. By then, he had completely taken control of Myra's mind, until she became his partner in crime, not just a witness or bystander. She insisted on being with him step by step, so he taught her to drive, and together they saved money to buy a small truck to lure victims. They even wrote a 30-page plan containing all the rules they had to follow literally during the crime. Among these rules, if the plan failed and they were caught, they would never surrender but fight to the death. They wanted their end to be like the crime movies they loved. One day, while sitting around the fire drinking, Ian said, "Life is a game, and it's better to live as a tiger than as a sheep." Then he asked Myra, "Is there anyone you wish dead?" She told him, "Yes, my ex-boyfriend, Ronnie Sinclair. I don't just want him dead, I want him to be tortured, humiliated, raped, then killed." Think about that. Ronnie became the first target on their victim list. But they didn't kill him, not because they were afraid, but because one of their rules stated that there must be no past or current relationship between killer and victim. The victim had to be completely random. Unfortunately, the first victim was a 16-year-old girl named Pauline, returning from a dance party. Although the crime succeeded, Ian was not happy because Myra broke the rules. Pauline was her sister's friend and had stolen a necklace and some money from her, which was strictly forbidden. Nevertheless, there was huge excitement and joy at the success of their first crime, which overwhelmed the anger. They returned to the grandmother's house, lit a fire, drank alcohol, and celebrated their crime. That same night, Myra asked, "When do we hunt the next victim? I want another crime." He looked at her and said, "That hungry?" She replied excitedly, "Yes, quickly." Ian opened a map of Manchester and pointed to the town of Hatton under Line, saying, "There, in this area, a child is sleeping now. He will be our next victim." The child's name was John Kilbride, 12 years old, working after school at a small stall. On November 23, 1963, Myra approached him and said, "I lost my glove, can you help me find it?" Ian promised him candy and chocolate. The poor child trusted them and got in the truck. They took him to Sadworth Moss, where Ian sexually assaulted him, then tried to kill him with a knife, but it wasn't sharp enough, so he strangled him with a rope until he died, then they buried him there. Despite the child's disappearance and a massive search campaign involving thousands of volunteers and police, he was never found, and they were not suspected. However, they became more cautious and didn't commit another crime for almost a year. On June 16, 1964, they kidnapped another child named Keith Bennett, 12 years old, who was going to his grandmother's house. They repeated the same scenario: lure, assault, strangulation, burial. Then, on August 15, 1964, Myra's younger sister married a man named David Smith, who was a criminal like Ian, which strengthened the relationship between him and Ian. Ian invited them on a countryside trip, and there began a new phase in their crimes. In 1964, Myra and her grandmother, along with Ian, were relocated from their old home to a new one as part of a government plan to move residents out of poor neighborhoods and into better housing. On December 26 of that same year, Boxing Day, a well-known holiday in the UK, while people were out enjoying the festive markets, Myra and Ian abducted a 10-year-old girl named Leslie Ann Downey in broad daylight and took her to their new home. Inside that house, the little girl Leslie endured horrific abuse at the hands of Myra and Ian. The torture lasted for an extended period and included both physical and psychological torment. The couple even went so far as to record audio of Leslie crying, begging them to stop, and pleading for mercy. Audio that would later become a crucial piece of evidence in court, revealing the sheer terror and agony she experienced. Eventually, after this prolonged torture, Myra and Ian ended Leslie's life. Her death was not sudden, but the tragic result of the sustained abuse she endured. After killing her, they buried her body in a nearby moor, trying to cover up the crime and avoid detection. Their crimes didn't stop there. In October 1965, Ian abducted another victim, a 17-year-old named Edward Evans. During this event, David, the husband of Myra's sister, witnessed the brutal murder, which left him deeply shaken. Unable to stay silent, David eventually went to the police and reported what he had seen. Thanks to David's testimony, police raided Myra and Ian's home, uncovering multiple bodies and substantial evidence linking them to several murders and disappearances. Among the evidence was the heart-wrenching audio recording of Leslie's final moments. This tape became a turning point in the case and drew massive attention from the public. Despite strong calls for the death penalty, Myra and Ian were not executed, as capital punishment had been abolished in the UK just months earlier. Instead, they received life sentences. Over the following years, Myra denied involvement in the murders until she eventually confessed in 1985 to participating in the killing of 5 additional victims. Ian, on the other hand, continued to deny his role until he was diagnosed with a severe psychological disorder and transferred to a psychiatric hospital, where he remained until his death. This story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance, especially when it comes to the safety of children and young people. It highlights the critical need to educate everyone about the dangers of trusting strangers and the importance of reporting any suspicious behavior to parents or authorities to help ensure safety and prevent such tragedies.